Eat your cake off the ground, my nephew said after he'd sent it tumbling from the table. You're not that proud anyway. A laugh rippled through the gathering. I stood there, the knife still clutched in my hand. I'd been about to slice into the cake, but my arm wouldn't move. It felt utterly frozen. No one offered a word of apology, no one even pointed out the obvious. Something cracked inside me, a small, sharp break, and I realized this wasn't an accident. My family had always treated me like a joke, a bit of entertainment. Even now, after he'd deliberately sent my cake crashing to the ground for everyone to see, they were laughing. The cake was substantial, a truly magnificent multi-tiered confection, covered in ivory-colored frosting and bearing a neat inscription. "Congratulations, Claire." I held it in both hands, carefully, as if cradling something fragile and alive. Perhaps it was, in a way. The backyard smelled of grilling meat and sweet smoke. Ohio summers always arrived with a sudden, almost violent intensity. One moment it was cool and crisp, the next the air was thick and cloying. String lights hung across the patio, someone was laughing a little too loudly, and a few people were already noticeably tipsy. "Come on over, dear," my mother said, without even glancing at me. "Put it next to the salads." I placed the cake on the edge of the long table, tucking it slightly off-center between plastic containers and open bottles of soda. I noticed, but didn't say anything. I hadn't spoken much all day, really. It was my day, technically. I'd defended my dissertation. First in the family, in fact. 4 years, 2 jobs, sleepless nights. No one applauded. "Hey, Aunt Claire," someone shouted, their voice high-pitched. My nephew, Noah, just 8 years old, bounded over to the table. Sticky fingers, scraped knees, a smug, self-satisfied grin. He'd always regarded me with an almost detached air, as if I were merely a piece of furniture. "Is that your cake?" he asked loudly. "Yes," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "Please be careful with it." He snorted and turned to my sister. "Mom, is Aunt Claire suddenly smart?" Someone laughed. My sister, Megan, didn't even look at me. She took a sip of her drink and said, "Well, she says she is." The laughter intensified. A tightness coiled in my stomach, but I forced a smile, the automatic, practiced response I'd used for years. "Now, Noah, don't bother her," my mother said vaguely. "Go and play." He didn't move. "Dad said," Noah repeated, a little too brightly, "that you were just studying because you had nothing else to do." The laughter rolled across the yard then, sharp and a little mean. I looked over at my dad. He was slumped back in his recliner, glued to his phone, not even glancing up. He just wasn't seeing me. "Noah," I said, my voice quiet, almost a warning. "Just stop." He grinned wider, a strange, unsettling thing. And then he nudged the cake, just a little at first, like he was testing it. I was already thinking someone will say something, right? "Hey, stop it." But no one did. The next push was harder. The platter went flying off the table. Everything happened all at once, a blur of movement and a jarring crash. There was this heavy thump, then a splattering of frosting on my shoes. The candles skittered across the patio tiles, like little burning sparks. For just a second, everything was still, silent, and then the laughter. It was real, loud, completely unrestrained. "Oh, Claire," Mom said, dissolving into giggles. "You really do love to make a fuss, don't you?" Noah was staring at the cake lying on the ground, practically beaming. "Eat your cake off the ground," my nephew said after he'd sent it tumbling from the table. "You're not that proud anyway." Someone else laughed. I was standing there, the knife still in my hand. I was about to cut into the cake, but my arm wouldn't move. It felt frozen. No one said anything. No one apologized. I carefully placed the knife back on the table. Too carefully, maybe. Like I was trying to hold onto something that was already slipping away. I pulled off my apron and just walked away. The laughter followed me, echoing behind me. It felt like I was a prop in some ridiculous scene, a scene that had finally, spectacularly succeeded. I didn't turn around. I stepped out through the gate and just stopped. The evening air felt colder than it should have been, or maybe it was just me, colder inside. I just stood there for a while, listening. The laughter from the yard was still drifting over, as if nothing had changed, as if I'd never even been there. I got into the car. My hands were shaking, but not like they usually do, not from tears. From this pressure, finally admitting it wasn't normal. I started the engine and drove off without looking back. The headlights cut through the dark, catching familiar bits of the road, the kind I grew up on. I just drove down streets where they told me to be easy, to be comfortable. Don't provoke anyone. Be smarter. You're strong, aren't you? None of it mattered this time. I wasn't crying. I just knew deep down that something had slammed shut inside me, like a door that wouldn't open to the same lock anymore. My phone buzzed as I got onto the highway. A message from my mom. You left too dramatically. You ruined the evening. Don't come over until you can act like a grown woman. I read it twice, then again. The reply didn't come right away. I called her later when I was pulling into the parking lot of my house. Just one line. I don't feel anything anymore. I hit send and switched my phone off. The night was quiet, too quiet for what had just broken. My apartment in Columbus always felt temporary, like a space between someday and maybe. I kicked off my shoes and sat on the floor by the couch, just staring at the wall. My thoughts weren't racing. There wasn't a meltdown. There was just a strange clarity. I opened my laptop. Not to work, just to open something. The screen flickered to life, showing a spreadsheet of expenses. And there it was, as always. My parents' house, the monthly payment. Megan's car loan, the lease. My name was listed next to both. I remembered my mom saying, "It's just a formality, you trust us, don't you?" For the first time, I didn't feel guilty, just a question. But who trusts me anymore? I closed the spreadsheet, opened a notepad, and typed a heading. Things I don't have to do anymore. The list was short, but final. This morning, I woke up before the alarm. Light was filtering through the blinds, gray and flat, offering no promises at all. I made coffee and settled at the table with my laptop. It was surprisingly quiet in my head. No replays of last night's scenes, no frantic attempts to justify anything. I opened the spreadsheet again. The house in Dayton, my name, the date 3 years ago. That's when Mom was crying in the kitchen, saying it was just support. For now, you understand. Megan was sitting beside her, glued to her phone. I signed it. Now, that one word, support, felt like a mockery. I went into my online banking portal. Riverstone Federal Credit Union. A notification popped up instantly. You are jointly responsible for 2 active loans. I closed the tab and took a deep breath. My phone switched on by itself like it knew its time had come. 3 missed texts from Megan. 1 voice message. I turned it on. "Claire, seriously, you're making a huge deal out of a stupid joke. Mom's upset. You know how she gets. Call me back." Her sister's voice was irritated, not angry. It felt like a punch to the gut. I didn't call back. An hour later, a message arrived from Dad. "You're overdoing it. We're family. Don't be selfish." I read it, and for the first time, I realized what that word, selfish, had always meant for us. To stop being convenient. At lunchtime, I walked out of the office and got into the car, but I didn't drive home. I punched the address into the navigation system. Riverstone Federal Credit Union, main branch. As I drove, there was no fear inside me. Just this feeling that I was finally heading where I'd been meant to go for so long. A woman, maybe 40, with a short, practical haircut and a calm look in her eyes, was waiting for me. "How can I help you?" she asked. "I want to find out how to be released from the joint liability on these loans," I said. The words felt clear, precise. She nodded. "You'll need a consultation with our financial specialist. Shall I schedule one for you?" "Today," I said, "if possible." The financial consultant's name was Michael Hansen. His office was sterile. Glass, gray walls, files. "You understand," he said, shuffling through papers, "that exiting joint liability could affect your family." "Yes," I said. "That's exactly why I'm here." He looked up. "People usually hesitate." "Usually," I shrugged. "They don't laugh when your cake is on the floor." He didn't say anything. He just kept reading. A minute later, "You'll need to confirm that you don't own a house or a car." "I don't," I said. "And I've never owned one." He nodded and pushed a list across the desk. "Then we can begin the process." I picked up a pen. And in that moment, I understood. I was doing something for the first time not for family. The day after the bank visit, I woke up to the buzz of my phone. Usually, I'd check it with a slight sense of unease, but today, there was a cold certainty to it. The names flashing on the screen, Mom, Megan, a bunch of numbers from home, were the ones I'd been desperately trying to ignore. First came the call from Mom. I didn't answer. Then a text popped up. "You realize what you're doing? The bank called Dad. You're putting us all in the line of fire." I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles whitened, reading the message over and over. My hand wasn't shaking, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. The word pudding felt like an accusation, one I'd heard echoing my whole life, even when it was veiled in smiles and platitudes like, "You're so strong." For the next hour, the calls kept coming, one after the other. The laughter from the party the night before felt alien and brittle now. I knew instinctively that this time no one was joking. Then came Megan's text, a long, almost pleading message. "You've made a mess of this. Mom's upset. We just want you to understand that family is more important than your ego." I closed my eyes and remembered the evening with the cake. The way we'd all been laughing when Noah had accidentally knocked his brother to the floor. Mom's dismissive words, "Don't be so sensitive." And the first time I'd truly felt invisible to them, like they weren't seeing me at all. And then something shifted inside me, not feeling that's surviving, not justifying that's truly living. I left the phone on the table and walked to the window. Outside, the city looked exactly as it always did. Cars, pedestrians, the glow of shop windows. But it felt distant, foreign. And surprisingly, I found that I liked it. That evening, Mom wrote again. This time, it was a long, emotional message, almost like a letter. "Claire, we've done so much for you. We've always been there. We didn't expect this from you. You've hurt us with your words and your actions. If you don't stop now, we'll think you're tearing our family apart." I sat on the sofa and stared at the screen for a long time. Each word echoed in my head, like a scratched-up vinyl record stuck on a single, worn-out note. I recognized this pattern. "You're ungrateful. You're selfish. You're destroying the family." They'd always use the same phrases, just with a different excuse. I took a deep breath and typed just one message. "I'm not tearing anyone apart. I'm just stepping away from something that doesn't belong to me." My hand trembled slightly as I pressed send. And suddenly, it felt a little easier, a little quieter. I realized I could stop this endless stream of accusations, not with words but with action. Later that evening, a persistent knocking came at the door. At first, it was quiet, then it grew louder and louder. My heart tightened, but not with fear. Instead, with a deep, internal tension, a recognition that I was now going to have to set a firm boundary. I approached the door. Standing on the landing were Mom and Megan. Mom with a tight line of her lips, arms crossed, her gaze tense as if preparing for an attack. Megan pale, her fingers trembling, her eyes red-rimmed. "Claire, open the door," Mom shouted, her voice shaky and high-pitched. "We need to talk." "I don't want to talk," I replied, not opening the door. My tone was even calm, even though my body was bracing for any reaction. "You're acting like a stranger," Megan cried, almost weeping. "You're destroying everything." I activated the recording on my phone, not for them, for myself, to have proof that I hadn't remained silent when they tried to break me. I took another deep breath and said through the door, "If you continue to behave like offenders, then I can no longer consider you part of the family in this way." The knocking stopped. They stepped back a few paces. I heard hushed, irritated words, but they began to fade. For the first time, I felt clarity. I could be myself. And that wasn't threatening anyone, except those who had tried to control me. I was already turning away from the door when Mom's voice rose again. This time, it wasn't a plea, nor a request for a calm conversation. It had become cold and calculating, the voice of a person accustomed to prevailing under pressure. "Do you even realize what this will mean for you?" she said. "You work for a serious company. Do you think it will be easy for us to explain to people what you really are?" I froze, not from fear, but from recognition. This was an old tactic. Not to strike directly, but to suggest that you might lose your reputation, your friends, your job, the ground beneath your feet. Megan stepped closer to the door. "If because of you we have problems," she said quickly, almost a whisper, "I'll tell everyone how you've really treated us. You've always been strange. People will believe you." I clenched the phone in my hand. The recording continued. "Are you threatening us?" I asked calmly. "We're warning you," Mom replied. "You're the one who forced this on us." I felt something shift irrevocably within me. This wasn't a conflict, it was blackmail, and I was no longer obligated to endure it alone. I turned away from the door, sank onto the kitchen table, and dialed a number. My fingers weren't trembling. My voice, however, was. "Hello," I said to the operator. "There are people at my door that I asked to leave. They refuse to leave and are threatening me." I gave the address. I said they were relatives. I said I felt pressured and feared further actions on their part. When I hung up, an unexpected quiet descended, even within. Behind the door, the conversation continued, but quieter. I heard fragments of words. "She's gone mad. How dare she?" "We'll remind her." Each word only solidified my resolve. The hallway lights flashed the landing with a harsh, crimson-blue glare. I hesitated to open the door, holding my breath until I heard a calm, male voice. "Police! Is everything all right, miss?" Two officers stood on the landing. My mother immediately changed, her shoulders slumping, her voice softening into something almost mournful. "It's a misunderstanding," she said. "We just wanted to speak with your daughter." "I told them to leave," I said, my voice tight. "They refused and started threatening me." The officer nodded and turned to the others. "You were asked to leave private property. You need to comply now." Megan exploded. "She's destroying our family. You don't understand." "Ma'am," the officer replied calmly, "that's not a legal matter." My mother looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. There was everything in her gaze: anger, resentment, shock, and a chilling awareness that her usual tactics had failed. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't respond. The officers escorted them out. The front door closed, the sound of their footsteps fading into silence. I locked the door with a resounding click and leaned against it, my knees trembling, not with fear, but with the slow, draining rush of adrenaline. I hit record. I listened for a few seconds, then switched it off. That was enough. That night, I sat on the kitchen counter for a long time, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea. And I found myself thinking about something strange. I couldn't be scared anymore, not with what I'd already been through. They were gone, and I remained. A few days later, I got a letter from Riverstone Federal Credit Union. The paper felt heavy in my hands, almost like a symbol of everything I'd been through over the last few years. Inside was a document, signed by a financial specialist. It officially confirmed that Miss Claire Brown was completely released from all obligations related to her parents' mortgage and her sister's car loan. I sat on the sofa and traced my signature with my fingers. It felt strange, just paper, really, but it held this sudden feeling of release. 3 years of effort, sacrifices, and endless "you-should" statements were finally, formally over. I was struggling to hold back tears, but it wasn't sadness anymore. It was calm. A clean, long-awaited, almost physical feeling. Now I can breathe. That evening, I was sitting in the kitchen with a mug of lukewarm coffee. Outside, the city was slowly sinking into twilight. It was the first time I hadn't thought about trying to please anyone. No one was watching, judging, waiting, and it was incredible. Things at Lumentech were moving along as they should. The project I'd been leading finally came to fruition, and I got a promotion. No one asked extra questions. No one expected sacrifices or obedience. Just my life, my responsibility. I was making dinner, watering my plants, putting on some music. I was laughing with friends who actually saw me, not the one who just always does what she's told. Elena, a work friend, brought me a cactus for the windowsill. "For your strength," she said, smiling. I ran my fingers over its spines and chuckled, calm but prickly, like me. A year later, my phone buzzed. A message from Megan: "Sorry for everything." Just a few words, no excuses, no explanations. I looked at the screen and felt this odd lightness. I didn't reply. Forgiveness doesn't always mean opening a door. Sometimes it means closing it and moving on. I put the phone down on the table, leaned against the windowsill, and took a deep breath of the cool evening air. Ohio was quiet. The rain softened the glow of the streetlights, and the city seemed to breathe around me. And I said it to myself quietly. "Welcome home, Claire." I was whole. I belonged to myself. And no one could take that away from me anymore. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more interesting stories. If you've experienced a similar situation, you can share it in the comments.